Panzerschule uses and recommends golden maple brushes. Our painting guides will now show you which golden maple brush type, which brush size we are using for all the different challenges that we meet in our modelling projects. Golden maple have been making artist brushes for over 30 years. Panzerschule can confidently recommend golden maple brushes to you because of the value, the quality and the range of brushes they have in their miniature painting sets. You can see us using the golden maple brushes in the following guide, and if you'd like to know more then check the link in the description below. There is also a discount code in the description, and if you use that code when ordering, not only will you save a bit of money but you'll also help the channel. Now let's get painting. Welcome back to the channel and to another painting guide, folks. I've not done this subject for quite a while, so this is a good opportunity to revisit it in a short format video, and that is going to be Romanian Infantry, and specifically the classic old warrior team, the only Romanian warrior team that you could get in the past, and that was Oriol Sandu, or whatever the correct pronunciation might actually be there, sorry folks. I will be following my normal layering approach, so you can see the Mini has been given an undercoat that is a shade coat of German Camo black brown. Now I'm using a golden maple size 3 long brush, not the round brush but the long brush, because what I'm doing here to begin with leather brown is mapping out all the folds, all the high points and the flat areas of the uniform. So we need a brush which has got a bit of flex to it. That's why the thin brush is ideal here, and the good point allows us to work accurately and tightly across all those features that we're mapping out. 2 coats are going to be required here, not only because it is the sensible and better technique to put your colour down in 2 coats at least, sometimes 3 for larger subjects, but we also want to finish off that mapping process that we started and start to cut into the shade that we have left from the first pass, so that the shade goes into the background. It becomes an accent. It provides the depth that we need to give the shape to the final figure, but it's not a dominant colour. Then switching to the golden maple 5-0 thin brush, so a lot smaller, we're going to go on to the highlight. Now we've got the thin brush for flexibility and a good point, and these are very important because we're going to be painting on very small highlight lines here, and we need control, because when we're painting on the highlight, just as with the shade colour, if we put on too much it starts to dominate, and what we're really trying to do here is just create contrast between a very small highlight and a very small shade. That makes the shape really pop. I'm using US Field Drab here. I find it's a suitable colour for the leather brown highlighting. It doesn't go too far, but it's also noticeable on the finished figure and gives a contrast that we're after. It's very important that you manage the moisture level on your brush when you're working with these tiny little highlights. You want the paint to come off on a very fine controlled line, and if the brush is too wet, then the water content will cause it to flow a little across the surface. If it's too dry, the paint will start to drag in lumpy lines across the surface. So watch what you're doing, see how it's working, refresh your brush if required, and also just take a bit of moisture out as required. So that's the uniform done. Let's move on to the equipment and other details. So I'm going to be using a size 0 round brush here. The round brush it's got enough strength to allow me to cover areas that are relatively large on the figure but still really quite small. But if I'm using just a thin brush for this, you tend to require more strokes. The round brush allows you to get these areas in more of just one pass. I find the round brushes from Golden Maple are ideal for this. There's various sizes of them in the pack that I am using, and are suitable for figures of all different sizes, and this size 0 for the Flames of War is perfect. Now I'm using old wood as the base colour for the satchel here. For the standard Romanian infantry who've got 2 satchels, the other satchel I would use green grey as the base colour. Now to highlight the satchel, I'm going to use the thin, not the round, but the thin size 50 golden maple, because we want to have flowing lines here rather than blocking in as with the round brushes, and the thin brush does this perfectly. I'm using Iraqi sand, painting very small highlights, even smaller than perhaps on the uniform, so we've got to manage the paint on the brush. If you keep the paint flowing correctly, you will get great results. Now to the leg wraps, and I'm going to be using the golden maple size 0 brush for this. That's a round brush. You could be using a thin brush for this, and the thin brush in many ways is easier to use for these really small lines that I'm painting on, and they're flexible to go around the shape of the legs, but the round brush allows me to get things down in one pass much more easily, and it also has a really good point for working these tight areas. Now you'll notice that I'm leaving the German Camo black brown in the recesses of the wraps, so I'm almost just like painting little hoops going down the legs. It's very important that we do not let that German Camo black brown dominate, so you have to cut in very tight. That's where a good point on your brush is important, where good paint consistency is important, so the paint doesn't flow into these recessed areas and cause you problems. But if we get this right, it's really going to make the lower legs pop on the figure and really define the difference between the wraps and the rest of the uniform. Then to highlight, it's the golden maple size 50. This is a thin, flexible brush to give us just that little bit of extra movement as we're working around all the very many curves on the wraps. And I am using Splinter Camo base from the Panzer Aces range as a highlight for green grey. Now the Oral Sandu character appears to have picked up some German equipment. He's got webbing, for instance, and the Romanians don't really have webbing. They've got much more basic satchels and such like to keep their equipment in. So I'm going to paint this in the standard way I do for my German infantry, which is a coat of German Camo medium brown with a highlight of Panzer Aces New Wood. The black helps frame these areas against the rest of the figure, against the German Camo black-brown shade. If you just stick with the German Camo black-brown on, for instance, grey areas, it just doesn't look right. You know, it doesn't look like a deep enough shade. Using a size 30 brush and some German grey, I'm now going to paint a highlight to the boots. This is the only highlight they're going to get because we want them to keep looking very black. And then I'm going to go to the metallic areas on the rifle and give them a layer of the German grey, a layer as in I'm going to apply a highlight later on. So it's going to be a solid layer with the black that we painted on just a moment ago framing that grey, being the external shade around those grey elements. The Oral Sandu figure has some mines at its feet, because in the game in version 3 the abilities were based around minefields for this guy. Now to do that I've given them a shade coat of German grey with a main coat of dark grey, and I will highlight them with some London grey. I'm also going to use London grey and a golden maple size 50 to highlight the metallic areas of the rifle. Don't overdo it here. We want this to be a sort of metallic glint, but we don't want the metal being too bright. Then back to the size 0 round brush, I'm going to paint the wood on the rifle, and I'm going to be using flat earth for this. It's important to remember when you're painting all these little areas on the figures, always to leave that German Camo black brown fringe, you know, the external shade around each of those areas, and only small amounts so everything is in focus. Then with a size 30 brush I'm going to apply a highlight using Panzer Aces New Wood. As I've mentioned, Oral Sandu appears to have picked up some German equipment, including the Stahl helm and the gas mask can here. I'm using the same colours as I would for the Dutch style helmets on the standard Romanian troops, and that is going to be starting with a shade coat of German Camo dark green. And the main colour is going to be US dark green. Painting the helmet is really straightforward, just leave a ring of shade around its base. That's the only definition you really need there. And the gas mask can will take a little bit more work because you just want to accentuate the shape, you know, the top, the bottom and the main body of the can by leaving very small amounts of the German Camo dark green. Then with the golden maple size 50, it's time for my good old favourite highlight for green, and that's green grey. Now for the rifle strap, you could be painting just a leather colour, but against most figures that would just disappear into the background. So I tend to go for a lighter colour, a colour that maybe suggests it's a cheap woven fabric type strap rather than leather. And the colour I use to achieve that is German Camo Beige World War II. Back to the golden maple size 0 round brush for some blocking in, and what I'm blocking in here is the skin shade. I'm not going to be leaving any of the German Camo black brown internally on the skin areas like the hands and the face. That's just going to be left around the fringes, for instance where the hands meet the cuffs, where the face meets the shape of the style helm. I'm using saddle brown as a shade colour because it's a nice warm shade colour that will contrast nicely with the main flesh colour. Then with the 50 long brush, not a round brush, I'm going to start blocking in the hands and the face. I'm going to be using bronze skin tone here from Game Colour, but any suitable skin colour will do. And what we're doing here is just working through those areas, start picking out all of the recognisable features. It's going to take you 2 coats here when you're painting this skin colour. Other smaller areas of the figure you can get away with 1 coat, but not with the face. Flesh pigments are a bit harder to work with and typically need 2 coats. And I paint my face by doing a line for the nose, then across the brows, and then lips, chin, and then cheekbones, and that's you created the basic structure of a face that will stand out nicely against the background of the figure. And after the skin, that's me done, and I'm on to the basing, and I'm going to be using the rubble base set for this, one of the small bases for this small team. I've glued them in place and I'm using my standard basing material, which is a Diorama FX from Vallejo, and I'm just going to carefully work that in and around the feet of the figures. I'm using a cocktail stick here because these are all glued down already. It's hard to get a larger tool into the spaces between them, especially on a small base such as this, and a cocktail stick will allow us to get right in between the legs so that there's not a smooth surface there when it comes to the painting. Then straight away, before it starts to dry, I'm going to add just a little bit of grittiness to those smooth pasty areas that I've just applied, and I'm using a Model Railway product. It's coal, Model Railway coal, and you can also use Model Railway ballast. It comes in various sizes. I'm not entirely sure which one to order, folks. Just check it out yourself if you want to go down this route, but it is a great product for getting a bit of stony grittiness to your figures. I hope you found it interesting. Hopefully it gave you a few ideas for your own Romanian figures. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all the subscribers out there, and to you folks who just drop into the channel from time to time to see what we're doing. If you'd like to subscribe, it'll help us grow the channel and get this content out to more people who enjoy Flames of War on YouTube. And if you hit the bell button, that definitely means we'll see you all on the next one.